Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Flamehead97, and this is going to be part 2 to my last video for albums from 2013 turning 10 years old in 2023. So as I just said, this is part 2. So let's going to get started. So kicking off this part 2 list is going to be Crash My Party by BRYAN. This is actually a really good BRYAN album in my opinion. Yes, it's true, it does have some bro country songs like That's My Kind of Night and Beer in the Headlights. But it also has more straightforward country songs like Roller Coaster, Drink a Beer, and many other songs. But yeah, it's definitely a really good album. The title track was another great song. So I thought Crash My Party was definitely worth making this list because it's a good album. I mean, it's not my favorite BRYAN album, but I still think it's a really good album still. So I'm gonna include it on this list. So first up is Crash My Party by BRYAN. Next is Based on a True Story by Blake Shelton. This is one of my favorite Blake Shelton albums of all time. It would easily probably be in my top 5 or top 3 Blake Shelton albums. I mean, he's got a lot of good albums. I think all of his albums are good, but Based on a True Story is definitely one that hits home for me a lot. Brings back a lot of great memories to me in my teenage years back in 2013 and so on and so forth. And even as an adult, this album still holds a lot of memories for me back then and still holds up very well for me even as an adult. So this album means a lot to me in my life. So it's definitely a great album. Got songs like Boys Around Here, Sure Be Cool If You Did, and shit tons of other good songs. So Based on a True Story by Blake Shelton easily makes this list. I love this album. So second album is Based on a True Story by Blake Shelton. Next is going to be Golden by Lady Antebellum. I think this was a solid album from them. I mean, I haven't heard the whole album in full. Maybe I just heard about 4 or 5 songs from it, if I'm being honest. But from what I've heard from it, I think it's a good album. Sure, not one of their best, but still has some good songs though, like Downtown, Goodbye Town. Compass was a solid song, easily my least favorite out of the 3 singles, but it was still a good song. So Golden, I don't think it's all that bad of an album, and I'll be glad to hear it all in the future. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it with the songs that I know from it, but everything I've heard from it, I thought was good. So Golden is the third album making this list. So album 4 on the list is going to be Demi by Demi Lovato. Of course, this album makes the list. I love this album. It's actually my favorite Demi Lovato album. I think it's her best album that she's ever made. I mean, get me wrong, she has other good albums like Confident and Unbroken and many other good albums, but her self-titled album, Demi, has also been my favorite album from her for a very long time, so there ain't nothing gonna change that. I mean, she's a good singer, very talented, lots of good songs and albums, but her self-titled album will always be my favorite album from her, I meant to say. So, definitely a good album. Have songs like Heart Attack, Nightingale, Neon Lights, Made in the USA. It's just shit tons of great songs. So, Demi's self-titled album, definitely an amazing album. So, it's the 4th album making this list. So, next album on the list is going to be Super Collider by Megadeth. I know this is one of Megadeth's weakest albums, along with their 1999 album Risk, but some songs on this album were decent, so I'm just going to leave it with that. I don't remember song name, a title from this album, but they had a song on there with David Dreamin from Disturbed. That was a good song. Some other songs I thought were decent. Still not one of their best, but since I'm a Megadeth fan, I thought I would still include it on the list, even though it is still one of their weakest albums that they've ever released, or even made as well. So, Super Collider is the 5th album in this list. So the 6th album in the list is going to be From Death to Destiny by Asking Alexandria. Yes, it's true, this band isn't for everybody, but I do think this is one of their best albums, if not their best album, because it had a lot of good songs. It had Moving On, that was a great song. Some other songs. It's been a while since I checked out anything from this album, to be quite honest, but I like this album. I think it's their best album. It's more metalcore compared to anything that they've ever done before. Like, they've had metalcore albums before this, because this is like their 3rd album, I think. But, yeah, definitely their best album, in my opinion, because a lot of their other stuff isn't really for me. I mean, the title track was good. I thought that was a good album from Asking Alexandria. But From Death to Destiny, though, will always be my favorite album from this band, because I think it's their best that they've ever done, because honestly, this band isn't really for me, but I would probably consider them as a guilty pleasure, because they have some songs throughout their career that I don't mind. But this album, personally, I think is actually really good, even though I'm not really the biggest fan of this band. But this album is going to make the list because I really enjoyed it. So, album 6 on the list is From Death to Destiny by Asking Alexandria. So next in the list is going to be album 7, and it is Fuse by Keith Urban. Yes, it's true, this album is more leaning towards country pop for Keith Urban, away from his original roots, like earlier on in his career and even albums before this. But I still think this was a good album. Had songs like Something in My Car, Cop Car, We Were Us with Randall Lambert, Little Bit of Everything, Raise 'Em Up with Eric Church. So this album was a good album, regardless of the change of sound that Keith Urban was heading for. And yes, Keith Urban still pretty much makes the country pop music now, just like he done back in 2013 with Fuse. But I think Fuse is his best country pop album, because anything after this, while I don't think it was necessarily all four bad, I just think this is his best album where he's stepping away from the original sound that he was known with in the 2000s. So, regardless of the sound with Fuse, I still think it's a good album. So, Fuse, I like this album. Sure, it's not one of his best, but still has shit tons of great songs. So, I'm including it on here. So, album 7 is Fuse by Keith Urban. Still a good album, though. So, next is going to be album 8 for the list, and it is Dream Theater by Dream Theater. This is their self-titled album. I don't really listen to this band all that much, because progressive metal wasn't really something I really am interested in. But I like some progressive metal bands, though, like Dream Theater, Queensryche, maybe one or two other progressive metal bands. But progressive metal isn't really my preferred style of metal. I don't think it's necessarily bad, it's just not really for me. But self-titled album by Dream Theater was still a good album, so I'll still include it on here, because I think they're a good band. Sure, they're not my favorite progressive metal band. I prefer Queensryche over Dream Theater anytime, because I just think they're the better band. That's just my opinion, though. But self-titled album by Dream Theater was still a pretty good album from them. So next is going to be the 2020 Experience 2 of 2 by Justin Timberlake, so this will be the 9th album in the list. This is the 2nd album in his series, the 2020 Experience, and I don't think this one was necessarily as good as the original from everything I've heard from it, but I still thought it was a decent song. Had songs like Not a Bad Thing, TKO, and some others, but yeah, some of these songs on this album were decent, but it had some solid songs on it though. Can't remember everything when it comes to this album, but those are just a couple song names that I didn't remember by heart. So this album, I don't think it's one of JT's best solo albums, but I still thought it was a decent album for what it is. So album 9, the 2020 Experience, 2 of 2 by Justin Timberlake. So the 10th album making the list is The Paradigm Shift by Korn. This was actually a really good album by Korn. I think it's probably their best, at least since See You on the Other Side, because Korn 3 didn't really care much for it. Paradigm Shift is definitely a great return for these guys. I really enjoy this album. And also, it was their comeback album for Brian Head Welch, because he was away for the band for quite a while. So he returned in the band in 2013 for their album, The Paradigm Shift. And I'm glad he did, because I've always been a big fan of Brian Head Welch's work when he's with Korn, and even his other band that he's in. But yeah, The Paradigm Shift is definitely a great album for Korn. It shows that they still can make good music even in the modern times. So this album is amazing. So I'm definitely included on here. It's definitely a great album. So album 10, The Paradigm Shift by Korn. So the 11th album making the list is Frame by Frame by cassadeepope. For you guys that aren't familiar with cassadeepope, she was originally in a band called Hey Monday, and then in 2012 she ended up appearing on season 3 of The Voice, and she won that season. And the following year, in 2013, she ended up releasing her debut solo album, Frame by Frame, and I really love this album. It's a great album. Yes, it's more country pop, but I don't mind this album personally because there's some good country pop music out there based upon how it's made and the topics and all that. But yeah, Frame by Frame, definitely an amazing album. Yes, it's true, when it comes to cassadeepope's more country pop stuff, I do think this is her best album, if I'm being honest. It's not to throw shade at her or anything, but I think this is her best album outside of her Hey Monday stuff. But I still don't think she's a bad singer though when she goes solo. But yeah, Frame by Frame was a great album. Had songs like Wasting All These Tears, Wish I Could Break Your Heart, This Car, One Song Away, 11, just has a lot of good songs on it. So it's definitely a good album, definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of country music. So Frame by Frame, definitely amazing album, so I'd include it on here. So album 12 making the list is Vengeance Falls by Trivium. Interesting fact about this album, it was produced by David Drummond of the band Disturbed. And when I found that out, I thought that was pretty cool actually. You can definitely tell that he had a lot of influence on Trivium upon the making of this album when he produced it pretty much. So, definitely a good album. Yes, it's not my favorite album by Trivium, but I still think it's a good album. Had songs like Strive, the title track, Vengeance Falls. The End Is Nigh, I think, was another song on this album, so it's a solid album. Yes, the album isn't one of my favorites, like I'm saying, but I still like the album because I like Trivium. I don't think they have any bad albums at all. So, Vengeance Falls, definitely a good album, so I'd include it on here. So, album 13 is Prism by Katy Perry. I actually think this is a more underrated album by Katy Perry because doesn't really seem to get really talked about much, because many people know Katy Perry for her 2010 album Teenage Dream. While that's still my favorite Katy Perry album to date, I still think Prism is definitely a close-up second when it comes to best Katy Perry albums. Prism is definitely a good album, had songs like Roar, This Is How We Do, and Birthday was a good song, and shit tons of other good songs. So Prism is definitely an overlooked album when it comes to the whole complete album, in my opinion, because many people probably just know it for the song Roar and pretty much overlook the album because that was the big hit of the album. Also had Dark Horse on this album featuring 3 6 Mafia member Juicy J, so that was another good song and another big hit. So people probably overlook this album because of its big hits, and think Katy Perry isn't really worth it when it comes to a full-length album. But Prism is definitely another great album from Katy Perry, so I would definitely recommend it. So album 13 is Prism by Katy Perry. Great album. So album 14 making the list is Aftershock by Motorhead. R.I.P. Lemmy, you're definitely missed, definitely a legend, and so is Motorhead. Motorhead will always be a band that has a special place in my heart, because if it wasn't for these guys, I would have never even got into professional wrestling, because their song The Game for Triple H made me a professional wrestling fan pretty much. So Aftershock, though, their 2013 album, is definitely a great album, very underrated, doesn't really seem to get much talk when it comes to Motorhead fans or even the hard rock / heavy metal community, but I still think Aftershock, definitely a good album, definitely underrated. I won't be able to tell you song names by heart, because once again, I'm not really good at remembering song names for certain artists or albums on top of my head, but this is still a great album by Motorhead. So Aftershock, definitely a great album, so I included on here. So album 15 in the list is going to be the self-titled album by Avril Lavigne. Not one of her best efforts, I'll admit that, and a lot of fans of her would also admit it, but I don't think it was a bad album at all. You had songs like 17, which is definitely an underrated song. Also have Avril Lavigne's ex-husband Chad Kroeger from Nickelback on this album. That was another great song. Here's to Never Growing Up, which was one of the biggest singles on the album. That's another great song. So this album was decent for what it was. I don't think it's near one of her best, but it's still a great album. So the self-titled album by Avril Lavigne makes the list. Definitely a good album still, regardless of not being one of her best. So album 16 in this list is going to be the Marshall Mathers LP 2 by Eminem. This is a sequel to his album with the same name. So, me personally, I think it's a great sequel. Yes, it's not as great as the original, of course. Any Eminem fan would probably agree with me. Even though I'm a fan of Eminem myself, I'm just saying other fans of Eminem would probably agree with me when I say this album isn't as great as the original Marshall Mathers LP album, but I still think it's a great sequel. Had a lot of good songs, like the song Rap God was awesome. That's a great song. Headlights featuring Nate Ruess of the band Fun. That was a great song. The Monster with Rihanna. So, Marshall Mathers LP 2 by Eminem. I think it's a great album, so I'm putting it on this list. So, album 15 is Marshall Mathers LP 2 by Eminem. Great album. Where we at, guys? I think this is like album 16 I'm heading into. So ARTPOP by Lady Gaga is next on the list. I really like Lady Gaga. She's a great singer. I think ARTPOP was definitely an underrated album. So I'm going to include it on here for you guys because I like this album. It's definitely underrated. I think it's Lady Gaga's most underrated album. This album just doesn't really seem to get much love when it comes to the pop community, but me personally, y'all, I think it's a great album. So I'm gonna put it on the list because I think it's a great album. So Art Pop by Lady Gaga had songs like Applause, the title track was great. She had a song on here with T.I. and some other rappers within the same song. Don't remember the song name by heart, but that was a great song. Of course, she had a song on here with R. Kelly called What Do You Want? I think that was the name of it. That was a great song. But it was later removed from streaming services and even future re-releases of the album because of the whole R. Kelly situation where he was pretty much being a pedophile, which is very disgusting. So fuck R. Kelly for that. I definitely don't blame Lady Gaga for removing that song from streaming services because of that shit. It's fucked up what R. Kelly has done to these women and even children. Just sickening. So yeah, fuck R. Kelly as a person. But yeah, Art Pop though, definitely an amazing album from Lady Gaga. I would definitely check it out, guys, if you're a fan of her music and even pop music in general, because it's definitely a great album, for sure. So Art Pop definitely makes this list. So I think that would be album 16 for the list, guys. Because I'm trying to go by number here so I know how many albums are on the list. So next up is going to be the self-titled album by country singer Danielle Bradbury, and she was another contestant on The Voice. She appeared on season 4 and won the whole season back in 2013, which is the same year she released her self-titled debut album. And this was definitely a great album. Had a lot of good songs like The Heart of Dixie, Young in America, Talk About Love, I Will Never Forget You, which is one of my favorite songs on the album. But yeah, this self-titled album by Danielle Bradbury is definitely amazing. I think she definitely deserves more radio play when it comes to country radio. Yes, it's true, she's been more inconsistent with her music because she's been making not many albums and all that, but I still think she's a good singer though, and should be more popular, but I still think she's a good singer, and I just think country radio is too ridiculous to overlook her, so fuck country radio for that, because her self-titled album is amazing from start to finish. So self-titled album is the 17th album making the list. So album 18 is going to be Britney Jean by Britney Spears. Yes, this isn't one of Britney's best albums, but I still thought it was a good album. Had songs like Work Bitch, Perfume. She has a song on here with her sister on this album as well. So I thought this album was decent from everything I've heard from it, so I'm going to include it on the list, guys. So the next album on the list is going to be Volume 2 by Five Finger Death Punch. Volume 1 I ended up having an original video, so I can't forget about Volume 2. As I said in the previous video, I've outgrown Five Finger Death Punch. I'm not trying to go on a broken record and say that. I'm just being honest with you guys. But regardless of how I feel about this band nowadays, I think their older music is great, in my opinion. And Volume 2 would definitely be in the list of good albums from Five Finger Death Punch. So I'm going to include it on this album's list. So this album had songs like Battleborn. Also had a cover, House to the Rising Sun was good. I think that was a great cover. It's been a while since I checked out anything from this album, y'all, to be honest. So if I forget the song names, then my bad, y'all. But yeah, as a former fan, I like this album. I think it's good. So yeah, Volume 2, definitely a good album. Cold was on this album. They have a song called Cold on this album. Can't forget to mention that one. That was a great song. So thought this was a pretty good sequel to Volume 1. Probably not as good, but still a good sequel though. So the next album on the list is going to be Crickets by Joe Nichols. Joe Nichols is a country singer, for y'all that aren't too familiar with him. So, yeah, I think Crickets is a great album. Had songs like Sunny in 75, which was the big #1 hit back in the day. Definitely a great song. Song, yeah, was great. Let Me Fall in Love with You was great. The title track Crickets was a great song. Footprints, I think, was another song name on this album. Definitely a good album. So, yeah, y'all. I really like Crickets by Joe Nichols. It's a great album. Joe Nichols in general is just an amazing singer. Definitely don't get enough recognition when it comes to country music. So, it's definitely a singer that definitely deserves some love. So, if you're a country fan, I would definitely check out his music, including his 2013 album Crickets, because that's a damn for sure great album. So, guys, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and end this list here with Crickets by Joe Nichols. So that's gonna wrap up this part 2 video for albums from 2013, turning 10 years old in 2023. Let me know what y'all think of this list, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care, guys. I'm Flamehead97. I'll see you on the next video. Peace.